Welcome to the Tea with Martha, where we spill the tea on the untold truths and real struggles of entrepreneurship. I'm Martha Pachow, a fellow business owner who's learned the ins and outs of business the hard way. Get ready for unfiltered discussions on the highs, lows, and messy realities of entrepreneurship. It's time to spill the tea and vent it out with us. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Tea with Martha. On today's episode, I'm going to dive into motherhood and building a multi-million-dollar childcare business. I'm often asked how it all happened. So today I'm just going to kind of dive into that, to my journey and looking back, maybe some of the things that worked and the things that didn't work. I think for me early on, my priority was my children and being able to work and provide for my family, but also be available. Early on, it was I wanted to nurse my children for a year, and that was my goal. And so that was the first step in actually even setting a goal. Like, what could I work in? How could I provide that I could still be with them? I could still nurse them. And so that was really early on the biggest motivating factor, and which is when I had my home preschool center. And then as I grew and we scaled, was really just setting clear priorities. Obviously, building a business while raising kids is it's a remarkable challenge that requires quite a bit of balance between ambition and also personal responsibility. And if you're listening to this, you're probably a friend of mine or a listener that identifies with being a go-getter. And so it's definitely a complex endeavor, right? I mean, we know it's possible, but also we want to make sure it doesn't come at an expensive cost of sacrificing too much of our family time or our own sanity, right? So for me, number one was setting the clear priorities. And I had to understand that in the bootstrapping season, I really didn't have a lot of options. But as I evolved, I had to set a clear priority of what was important. What were the tasks that actually moved the needle for me, that made a significant impact in my business and in my family life. So for example, I knew that for us, dinners as a family were important. And I wanted to make sure that for the most part, they were home cooked meals. And also at the same time as I was building my business, I had to be, I wore a lot of hot hats, so I had to be present. And so really honing in on that whole principle that 20% of our efforts will yield 80% of the results. So focusing on the tasks that drive the business growth, and then knowing that, okay, it's time to go and my day has to finish at a certain time because we have to go home and start dinner. Or if my husband was cooking that night, it was like I just had to be home in time for dinner and really reset. So setting my clear priorities, number one. Two, I really had to learn time management and leverage the strategies because that is critical. I mean, I still to this day, I have to continue to filter out what I can delegate or allocate to something else or to another day, but really just honing on the craft of allocate specific times for work and for family, and then just sticking to them as much as possible to avoid conflict. So for me, it was knowing like, okay, every day I had a theme in my business. If Mondays were money, anything that had to do with money, whether that be looking at statements or having to, years ago it was bill paying, but now it's, I need to approve certain expenditures so that our accounting Team can pay things off, or any and everything that had to do with money was, I would save it for Mondays. And so then it was my block time was honed in and hyper focused on that. Then Tuesdays were team and training and anything that had to do with that. And so then I knew if I had, whether that's preparing for a team training, giving a team training, having a team meeting, anything that had to do with that subject, either I prepared or I just waited for that day to work on it. And so I knew that if something else came up, on that day, it could wait for whatever other day that was allocated to, if that makes any sense. So those time blocking tools are so significant because they truly enhance our productivity, and those dedicated times, blocks of time, they reduce this transition and this mental switching, which honestly, it is a scientific fact. Like it takes us time to switch gears. But if we're focused on one particular task or theme or subject, we are much more efficient. And so that mental load also, that is also exhausting, right? When we're switching gears constantly. So number 2, leverage your time management strategies. Like, how can you manage your time, hyper focus so that you have more impact, move the needle, definitely more efficiency, and then you reduce the amount of time that you have to go back and forth, back and forth. And of course, everybody likes to say the word delegate, but, outsourcing, number 3, outsource and delegate, and recognizing that doing everything yourself is actually not sustainable and not possible for a long period of time. I am a big proponent, and I do believe that there are seasons, and often it's in the startup, where you do wear a lot of hats. And I think that's also part of the beautiful journey of growing into and evolving into this business owner. But at every stage and at every step of your business, and if you're of who you are, is really understanding that outsourcing tasks that are outside of your skill set are even better, right? So when I look at something, I now know what I'm good at and what I'm not. And what I'm not good at, I definitely outsource instead of trying to figure everything out, because it takes me so much time and effort and patience. And again, that mental load of just trying to figure it out, where I'd rather spend all that time, effort, and capacity on the things that I do best and have a better outcome. So, yeah, so delegating, outsourcing, those responsibilities to trusted team members are truly key. Um, this not only helps you manage yourself, your workload better, but honestly, it also empowers others. And that empowerment and that trust that you give others really increases this employee feel of being part of a team, because they are needed, right? Like, you really actually need them, and people want to be needed. They want to be validated. They want to be accepted. They want to be trusted. That is a human nature in us. And as you think of elevating yourself, it really goes hand in hand with elevating others. So if you are delegating within your organization, that is such a huge employee. I think it increases employee satisfaction, knowing that you're trusting them. But also, to that note, I often say you need to measure what you manage, right? So what I had a really hard time was delegating, and then I'd go back and they would mess it up, or they wouldn't do it how I wanted it, or, we just struggled, or it wasn't done in time, and then I learned that it was really me. And so delegating definitely has its nuances, and knowing how to delegate, knowing who to delegate to, setting maybe the expectation and parameters, like, hey, I'd like it to look like this. I need it done by this time. If you need help with this, circle back, like just really setting the tone. I was not good at that. I would just kind of dump and run. And so then I would come back and be like, see, this is why I have to do it myself. Like I can't trust other people. Well, actually the problem was me, not other people. And again, that's like a whole other subject in and of itself. That's another episode, is learning to delegate, but definitely a powerful one that is going to increase that capacity for you. What are the things that really move the needle? And when you look at time and efficiency, as your business grows and as value of your time. So if your net profit, let's just say is $1 million, you got to look at it like, even though you're not necessarily bringing home the $1 million and pocketing them, but the outcome of your work is that. And so when you look at it, you know, it's incredible how you can quantify time and all these minutia, all the tasks that you probably shouldn't be doing. I mean, they become so irrelevant, and you understand like it's such a waste of your time because you don't need that, right? Like you don't need to do that. So like for example, if I take $1 million, let's say that's what I want my business to make, and now maybe you don't make it yet, but you want your business to make right net profit, $1 million that year. And if you divide that, I mean, that's $480 an hour. So let's just round that up to $500 an hour. If I know that my goal, or if I'm already there, or I'm very close by, I'm looking at the value of my time and what are these tasks that I'm doing? Are they worth $500? Would I pay someone else $500 to do the thing that I'm doing? And so when you shift that mindset in terms of delegation and looking at it from a perspective of holy, holy wow, like this is this is crazy, right? Like, oh my goodness, I wouldn't pay somebody $500 to do this. So yeah. So just look at it that way. What are the tasks that you're doing, and are they worth that end goal? Are they worth your time? And of course, investing in automations. And I think this just depends on the business, but I think for like a service-based business, in my case, in childcare, there are things that can be automated and there are things that cannot. And so as we grew and the complexities of having multiple locations, multiple layers of management and teams and different employees at different places, certain things that were very manual, like maybe the hiring process for us and onboarding. And in childcare, we do a lot of hands-on training. Obviously, the nature of our service is serving children, caregiving, and that requires a lot of just personal touch. And I mean, handholding in a good way, right? Like we really want to show them the ropes. And so that was always very important for me. And I didn't want to replace that with a screen. And so when we were looking at different ways to automate, we moved payroll companies a few times, which was a nightmare. Again, that's an episode for a whole other time. But when we look at onboarding, like from the time that they apply, if they see an ad or if they go on Indeed or whatever it may be, now our payroll and our CRM and our applicant tracking system are all linked. So now that candidate inputs their information, and now we capture all of that, and it's more auto generated into if they're hired, then they're already in the system. There's an email drip campaign, if you will, of all their paperwork that needs to be done. There's reminders. It sends them to our video onboarding so that on their first day of training, when they come on site, we have already expedited almost, hours of paperwork and things to make sure that they're ready to go. Of course, you have to always maintain labor law, compliance and things like that. But really just looking at what can you automate, and then what are the things that you're telling yourself that you can only do or that someone has to do manually that honestly in this day and age can be easily automated, so that the things that cannot be automated are then you're fully present, they're more efficient, it's less time. And in a growing organization, and when you have employees, time equals money, right? I'm really big on efficiency, like what makes the best use of our time. Because again, when I look at everyone's time collectively, so if my goal is my tasks need to equate to $500 an hour, and when I look at my team, if I'm saying, okay, well, I have, directors and management level staff working on, again, tasks that either an automation can do or someone else at a lower pay rate can do, so that they can invest that time in the things that matter to me. I want to make sure that, the onboarding process, that the key people in the organization that have shown and proven, they aligned to our values, those are the people that are having the touch points with our new staff and showing them. Like, to me, that's the best spent time, is investing in training either new people or just ongoing over time, right? Sorry, I digress. And I think I get fired up about all this stuff because it's so important to be efficient with our time. When I think of time too, I mean, it's this not necessarily doesn't have to do with automation, but I really encourage you to look at the cost of your meetings. So there again, let's just say you pay $20 an hour average. Okay. If you're paying $20 an hour average and you have 5 people there at your meeting, that's really costing you $2,000 that hour. So was that meeting worth $2,000? We have annual summits where we get all our company, just because we have 6 locations here in the Phoenix Valley. And so when we get together, now I'm getting 150 people, just give or take. Let's just say average is 20. And so that's $3,000. Now, this is very average, right? People make a little less, people make a lot more, management, things like that. But so let's say $3,000 an hour, and I'm going to have about an 8-hour day. That's going to cost me in time $24,000 for this one day of training. So when we look at what are we doing, what is the content of our meeting, what speakers are we bringing, what are the outcomes that we're looking for, because this meeting is costing us $24,000. That's not including the event space, the food and beverage, the speakers, all the other things. I mean, that's on top of that. And so anyway, that looking at the value of our time, guys, is such a huge, huge needle mover. Another big thing that when you're looking at that, building your business, is really that support network and having a strong support network. And definitely within motherhood, right? I think early on when my kids were really young, I felt like I was in a silo and didn't really have that, like a big network of people, because I was home. I was working from home and then had 2 small children. And so my time was just absorbed in that season. And as I grew a little, and especially when I went through my divorce and had no family here in town, I really just leaned into my support system. And I had a few good friends that truly were a lifeline to me, And so when I look at that in my personal life, definitely having that support network, and that includes family. Maybe they can help with kids and moral support, of course, professional connections. But, how can we as mothers, as parents, and business owners ensure this that we're building this strong network? It doesn't always mean having a lot of people in our network. It just means really having people that you can count on, that maybe you're having a really hard time, and whether that be in business, and that they could give you some advice or some support, or just being a good shoulder to cry on. And or hey, I'm running late, I'm stuck in a meeting, can you help me pick up my kids on the soccer field, or whatever it may be. So really, just I think having that support network is such a huge deal. Although I didn't have family here in town, I think for me, it was, I can definitely attest a lot of my going out and learning and going to conferences, and a lot of childcare conferences and business conferences and coaching or retreats. And I've done a lot of that over the last a lot of years. And when I think about it, I'm just so thankful that I had the ability, that my parents, were very supportive. And for me, that was important because I just didn't want to leave my kids with someone that wasn't family, because it just feels different, I think. And they were available and willing and available. And so we would plan it out. My parents would drive, used to live 4 hours away. It was somewhat doable, right? Of course, it was time and effort on their part, which I will forever be grateful for, because that really helped me lean into learning and absorbing. And I would just come back passionate and fired up and ready to roll. And like every time I'd go to something, I'd come back. I remember my staff saying, "Uh-oh, she's coming back from a conference. Let's see all the things she wants to do." So it's all thanks to that network and having a community, and provide emotional and practical support in those times of need. And when you're in that time of figuring it out, scaling, and you're past that startup, it requires a whole other skill set, if you will. That was really important for me. And I'm so grateful to my parents, and having those key relationships and community. And another thing that I want to talk about is setting boundaries. This was really hard, again, in my time management, and or being available all the time for, my clients, which in my case are parents. And especially when I was more front facing, and had a physical office in the school, and I worked was needed on site. And so setting those boundaries is hard, because there's a lot of moving pieces in a childcare center. We have fully operational kitchens, and so that meant we had cooks, and we have food deliveries, and we have multiple meals a day we have to prepare, and multiple dietary needs and restrictions. And so there would constantly be either questions, or that needed to be resolved. The phone, visitors, tours, which are potential enrollments, which equal sales, right? Of course, staff, and questions and needs, and having difficulties and big behaviors. That if there was issues in a classroom, or an accident, or a child was having a moment and the teacher needed extra support. I mean, it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop when you're in a childcare center. And so setting boundaries was like unheard of for me. I didn't even understand how that would work for me, because I was like, well, it sounds great, y'all, when I listen to things, but that just doesn't apply. It can't be applicable in a childcare center. And so while that could be true, I need to set boundaries for myself and my time. And specifically too, as it related to my keeping myself available for my kids, especially on weekends or family time. And so I just learned, I had a coach, shout out to Hani Wolchansky. And she really helped me set boundaries, and how to even have space in between work and coming home, because I had to go like from straight from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. And there was no time even to shift gears. And so I learned that I had to set a boundary. I was already burnt out at this point when I asked for help. But my hope is that you don't burn out if you use these preventative tools, right? These are essential for that. And so that might mean you have some strict cutoff times for work, right? Like as a certain time, you just say, you know what, I'm off, I'm done, I'm going to cut this off. Resisting the need to be checking email and available at all times, especially during family dinner or during, just peak times, because I always felt like there was always something happening, because there really was. However, I needed to learn that if I wasn't there and someone else was there, they could handle it. And if for some reason they couldn't, that I could, unless it was the building was burning down, I could deal with it tomorrow or when I'm available next. And so learning to manage that and setting that boundary so others know, and you set the expectation of how they show up for you and you show up for them. And so then there's a mutual respect. And those expectations can be managed when you have conversations and when you also encourage others, right? So this was the other thing. Like I would always go back and forth with my staff and during evenings and weekends, and we'd all get fired up because we'd work on something or we'd find something. But then I started realizing that wasn't good for me. And then I started encouraging my staff, like, hey, weekends are for family, unless it's like an amazing thing or a super uber emergency, or you just want to say hi, right? Like, don't text me and I'm not going to text you. We have to know that we need time off too. And I expect you to also have time off so that you could show up your best self for your family, but also then on the week, during the week, when you're here and you're on. And so that's been also a big game changer, and just really continuously evaluating and adapting. So I'm really always trying to assess, how am I balancing work and family? What am I needing to change? And there's seasons where I am required to do a lot more work. Even now, 17 years into my business, there's seasons. Like this time last year in 2023, I was needed. I lost a few key people, which required me to get back in. And as much as I didn't want to do it, it actually ended up being a blessing in disguise, even though it was brutal. But I was able to look at some inefficiencies, some things that just because we had always done them that way didn't even make sense anymore. And so sometimes that separation from the day to day helps, because you just get a bigger vision. It's more of the eagle's view, where you're looking at it from much higher perspective than when you're in it. You just see eye level view. So you see this high level of like what's not, what we shouldn't be doing, what's inefficient, what can be delegated, what can be automated. And it helped us do a lot of changes over the last year, hired people at a higher skills level. And that required a bigger investment, but really in the end, it was worth it. And so now I'm really thankful, but evaluating and adapting as needed. And so that when you're able, that season, when you're able to step away a little bit or a lot more, you can adapt to that and you can enjoy more of that family time or more of your freedom. And just being willing to change and have that flexibility and adapt is truly crucial to both your business and family as you grow and you change. And then I would say, like, lastly, but certainly not least, is really taking care of yourself. This has probably been one of the biggest struggles, if I'm being honest. I have a roller coaster relationship with, um, health, and well, not health, but like exercising and sticking to something. And again, it's when I go in through these seasons of I need to get in it, and my day starts early and I go hard because I really like to be present when my kids come home. And so having that boundary set of, I only have so many hours in my day. As soon as my kids go off, I need to like run really hard because I need to also stop. There's a hard stop at a certain time. But that means sometimes that I neglect my own well-being and I don't eat enough, or I go hours and hours without eating. I do drink a lot of water, I will say that, but moving my body. So I've learned that, eating and what I nourish and what I feed my body, I think I'm pretty good at that. I could always be better, but I would say caring for myself. So I encourage you to take care of yourself and really looking at running a successful business and raising a successful family. Really, everything starts and ends with us. And especially as women and mothers, that is just like not an easy task because we're givers, we're nourishers. We want to give, 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 make sure all the kids are fed and all their needs are met. And then we run into our business in the marketplace and we're serving and we're teaching and we're leading and we're making decisions and problem solving and planning things. And we forget that we are the source and we can't serve from an empty space and we can't pour from an empty cup, right? And so just keeping those things in mind. Now, some of the things that I do are I have white space in between things. I don't run from one thing to the next anymore. Just really taking care of myself, releasing the guilt and feeling like I always have to do something for someone, releasing the guilt of all of that is important too, because even that mental load isn't healthy. And so, really going from survival to thriving so that you could scale and build a multi-million-dollar business requires a honed in craft. And who I was 17 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even a year ago is so different, right? I look back and I'm like, who was that person? How did I survive really? Because I was just running on fumes for so long. And my hope is that you're able to accelerate your growth and what you're looking for and that wealth building piece so that you can find freedom. I'm thankful for that. I always kept it very present that I didn't want it to come at a cost of my family. And so obviously in childcare it was a little bit easier because I would run and pick up my kids back when I was still really needed in the office. I would run and pick them up and then bring them back with me. And so, I think back and even they remember, and I think that there's so much value in that, them remembering seeing their mom work and serve others. And they remember so much more than even I thought they would remember. I think it's a beautiful thing. I don't regret it. I'm thankful. And now that they're much older and they're like, I don't want to go to the daycare. Like, what am I going to do over there? Um, now they also work sometimes on the weekends, or they want to make a little extra money. They stick around, they help in the summers, things like that. But it looks different now. They're working, they're helping, and it's not like I have stuff in my office for them to stay entertained or throw them in a classroom so they can play with other kids. It just looks different, but really taking care of ourselves and making sure that we're taking care of those that we love the most. And sometimes it does require, running around with our kids while we're on a call or while we're in a meeting. I get it. Like it's part of building a business. I think that there's this idea that people have a separation or that you can't have it all. And my husband and I did a couples mastermind a few years ago with Mike and Kara Yala. And I remember Mike told us on a call, Martha, you can have it all, but you can't do it all. And it still resonates with me because I find it to be so true. You can have a life of freedom. You can build a multi-million-dollar business. You can be a parent. However, you can't do it all. And so looking at like all the things that we talked about, setting your priorities, setting your goals, leveraging your time management, outsourcing, delegating, investing in automation, building a strong support network, setting your boundaries, and evaluating, adapting when needed, and then caring for yourself. Like all those things can be possible. If this girl from rural El Centro, California, with no business degree, by the way, just a teaching degree, was able to build a multi-million-dollar business with her kids in tow, I'm a believer that you have to look and you have to find what works for you, and what my goals are different than your goals. But I think, like Mike and Carayala say, you can have it all, you just can't do it all. So with that, my friends, if you are in the childcare industry and you're looking to scale and build something far beyond what you can do, I would love for you to join my webinar, where I'm going to dive into how I built my business and really diving into all these strategies, so we can link arms and really see you shine in your childcare and let you run the childcare business and not the childcare business run you. So I hope today has been helpful. I hope you could like and subscribe and share with your friends, whether they're in childcare or not. This applies to any business owner. And if you're in childcare, enroll in my webinar where we'll dive in deeper to all of this. Thanks again for listening, and I can't wait for the next one.
Thank you so much for joining me on another episode. If you're struggling to find your flow in juggling all the things that go into building and scaling your dreams, while also being present for your family and finding time to take care of you, I want to invite you to join my free 21-day challenge, Tame the Chaos. You'll get my tried and true time management workbook designed to help you become a master at organizing and prioritizing how you spend your time. Plus, I'm going to walk you through a daily exercise that will transform chaos into clarity and keep you on track to creating momentum towards your goals. I personally use this method myself, and it is a vital key to my success over the years. Please visit marthapachow.com/tamethechaos to register for the challenge now and get instant access to the workbook. And if you've enjoyed today's tea, make sure to follow, rate, and leave a review. Stay connected with us on social media at The Tea with Martha for updates and behind-the-scenes moments. Remember, every woman's story is a sip of inspiration, and together we're brewing success. This is Martha signing off. Cheers.